heard the rumors about Tommy Mottola's so-called hold on Mariah.
He controlled everybody around me. Everybody was afraid of him. There was so much security and armed security. I did feel like I was held captive in that relationship.
Those are Mariah Carey's own words. Not about a stranger, not about a stalker, about her husband, the man who discovered her, launched her career, and turned their marriage into something she would later compare to a maximum security prison. And one night at dinner, in front of a room full of guests, Tommy did something with a butter knife that made her understand she might not survive the marriage. At 56, Mariah finally told the full truth about what Tommy Mottola did that made her run for her life. Mariah had one belief she held on to through everything, that if she gave someone her talent, her trust, and her loyalty, they would protect her. And for years, she believed Tommy Mottola was that person. The fairy tale version starts in December of 1988 at a CBS Records party in Manhattan. Mariah was 19, she was waiting tables, sleeping on a mattress on the floor of a friend's apartment, sometimes washing her hair in restaurant sinks because the hot water didn't work. She had poured everything into a 4-song demo tape. That night, her friend Brenda K. Starr brought her along to the party, and Mariah somehow managed to hand her tape directly to Tommy Mottola, the head of Columbia Records. He was 42. He barely noticed her. But on the ride home, in the back of his limousine, he played that cassette, and what he heard made him tell the driver to turn the car around. He wanted to find her that very night. She was already gone. When he tracked her down, he offered her a deal that most artists never see in their lifetime. Her first album went to #1 and stayed there for 11 consecutive weeks. By the time she was 22, she had won the Grammy for Best New Artist, sold tens of millions of records, and was being called the voice of a generation. And every single album, every single decision about her career was funneled through Tommy Mottola. On June 5, 1993, they married at St. Thomas Episcopal Church in New York City. 300 guests, including Barbra Streisand, Robert De Niro, and Bruce Springsteen. Mariah wore a Vera Wang gown with a 27-foot train inspired by Princess Diana's wedding dress. She was 23, he was 43. From the outside, it was the ultimate fairy tale. The girl from nothing who sang her way to the top and married the most powerful man in music. But Mariah was about to learn something that would take years to fully understand. The control started so quietly she almost didn't see it. At first, it felt like concern, like a man looking out for his wife. Tommy chose which producers she worked with, he picked the sound of her records. And every time Mariah said she wanted to explore R&B and hip-hop, the kind of music that actually felt like her, he shut it down. She later said he tried to wash the urban off of her. That phrase lands differently when you know who Mariah is. She grew up biracial on Long Island. White mother, a former opera singer. African-American and Venezuelan father. Being biracial in a mostly white neighborhood meant she never quite fit. Kids cornered her at sleepovers and called her the worst names imaginable. Teachers told her she used the wrong colors when she drew pictures of her own family. Music was the one thing that made sense when nothing else did. So when her own husband deliberately erased the black side of her artistry because it didn't fit the image he wanted to sell, it was not just a business decision. It cut to the core of who she was, and the control didn't stay in the studio.
Hey, what are you doing?
Every move I made, everywhere I went, I was monitored minute by minute, day after day, year after year.
At home, Tommy decided who Mariah could see, who she could talk to, and where she could go. She has said plainly that she needed his permission to walk out her own front door, one of the most famous women alive, and she couldn't leave her house without asking. And the surveillance was not even the worst part. Their home was a 51-acre estate in Bedford, New York. 22,000 square feet, custom built, the kind of property you would see in a magazine and think somebody has everything figured out. Mariah gave it a different name. She called it Sing Sing, after the maximum security prison just up the Hudson River. The property was ringed with security cameras at every angle. Armed guards walked the grounds around the clock. Members of the household staff were recruited to report back to Tommy on Mariah's movements, where she went, who she called, what she said. Her phone was monitored, her schedule was logged. The surveillance didn't arrive all at once. First it was the cameras, which Tommy explained as security for the property, then the guards, which seemed reasonable for people that famous. Then Mariah started noticing that things she had said in private conversations were being repeated back to her by Tommy himself. That is the detail that breaks a person. Not the cameras, not the guards. The slow realization that every person around you, the housekeeper, the driver, the assistant, is reporting to someone else. that you do not have a single ally inside your own home. But the moment she talks about most happened over dinner. Guests were seated around the table. Tommy walked over to Mariah, picked up a butter knife from the place setting in front of her, and pressed the flat side of it against her right cheek. He held it there while his people watched. Nobody said a word. And then he slowly dragged that thin strip of metal down her face and along her throat. She described that moment in her memoir, how every muscle in her face clenched, how her entire body locked in place, how her lungs stiffened and she could not breathe. You would think someone at that table would have said something. Nobody did. That was the night Mariah understood, with complete clarity, what her marriage was. Not a partnership, a cage, and the man at the head of the table was not her husband. He was her warden. After the butter knife, something inside Mariah went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that means peace. The kind that means a person has stopped fighting. She described herself as miserable, crying and alone, living what the world saw as a dream. Red carpets and platinum records and sold-out concerts, while behind those gates, she was slowly disappearing. She wrote in her memoir that she was living my dream but couldn't leave my house. Lonely and trapped, I was held captive in that relationship. She called the marriage a slow and steady march into captivity. She called the mansion an ironclad dungeon. When interviewers asked her, years later, what it felt like, she said she was afraid she would end up haunting the house dead. 5 words, that is all she gave them. The isolation was the cruelest weapon of all. Tommy had cut her off so thoroughly from friends, from family, from anyone who might help, that by the time she thought about leaving, she felt like she had nobody to turn to. And that was by design. Isolate someone long enough, and they start to believe they cannot survive on their own. The best-selling female artist of the 1990s was pacing the halls of a $50 million estate, wondering if she was going to die there. But Mariah, even at her lowest, was not someone who gave up quietly. She kept a packed bag underneath her bed at all times. Essentials only, ready to grab if she ever got the chance. She also rented a secret apartment somewhere in New York City, without Tommy's knowledge. A place she could escape to for a few hours, just to breathe. Think about that for a second. She was sneaking out of her own home with a go bag, like someone fleeing a war zone. And the rest of the world had no idea. But leaving Tommy Mottola was nothing like leaving an ordinary marriage. This was the head of Sony Music, the man who could make or break any career in the entire industry with a single phone call. He had lawyers, connections, and the kind of influence that could destroy everything she had built. Walking away meant risking everything. Mariah had spent her entire life building, and Tommy made sure she knew it. When she pushed back, he pushed harder. He reportedly sent armed search parties after her when she was out socializing with other musicians or was gone longer than he expected. On at least one occasion, he showed up at a recording session and made it clear, without raising his voice, that she would not be working with those people again. But here is the thing about Mariah Carey. That stubborn spark from Long Island, from sleeping on floors and being told she would never belong anywhere, the same fire that made her walk into a room full of executives at 19 years old with nothing but a demo tape and a dream. It was still there. She was not going to die in that house. And then, quietly, everything shifted. Not with a dramatic announcement or a confrontation. It started with a rooftop in a rainstorm. Mariah had met Derek Jeter, the New York Yankees shortstop, young, confident, and existing in a world entirely outside of Tommy Mottola's control. They talked in secret. They flirted, all of it hidden. And one night, on the roof of Jeter's apartment building, while it rained, they kissed. Mariah would later write 2 songs about that single moment, The Roof and My All. If you go back and listen to those lyrics now, knowing everything you know, they sound completely different. That kiss didn't rescue her. Nobody rescued Mariah Carey. But it reminded her what it felt like to make a choice that was entirely her own, to want something and actually reach for it. In December of 1996, Mariah separated from Tommy. The divorce was finalized on March 4th, 1998. She walked away from their Bedford estate, that gilded prison she had called Sing Sing. It was later sold for just over $20 million. And 1 year after that, it burned to the ground in an early morning fire. Some stories really do write their own endings. She walked away from the man who controlled the entire music industry. She walked away from the security, the machine, the infrastructure that had built her career from the ground up. And she did it knowing that Tommy could pick up the phone and make her life very difficult, which is exactly what he did. What came next was the album the world almost didn't get. Butterfly, released in 1997, was the first record Mariah made entirely on her own terms. She brought in the producers Tommy had spent years forbidding: Q-Tip, Missy Elliott, Puff Daddy. She made the R&B music he had told her she couldn't make. She named it Butterfly because, in her words, she felt free for the first time. But freedom came with consequences. Tommy, by multiple accounts, worked behind the scenes to undermine her career after she left. When her film Glitter came out in 2001, her lead single Loverboy was allegedly sabotaged when his team at Sony secured specific sampling rights to block the beat she had chosen. The film bombed. Mariah had a very public breakdown, and the music industry wrote her off. Then, in 2005, she released The Emancipation of Mimi. 10 million copies sold worldwide. We Belong Together became one of the defining songs of the decade. At the 48th Annual Grammy Awards, Mariah won 3 trophies, her first Grammy win since 1991, and received the only standing ovation of the entire night. Emancipation, freedom, on her own terms, without him. And where is Tommy Mottola now? He published a memoir in 2013. He admitted the relationship was absolutely wrong and inappropriate. He called himself controlling and obsessive. And then he said this: "Was I obsessive? Yes, but that was also part of the reason for her success." Even in his apology, he took credit for what she built. That is the kind of sentence that tells you everything about who someone still is. The man lost his marriage, lost his grip on the biggest voice in music, and still could not admit that she made it in spite of him, not because of him. In 2020, Mariah published The Meaning of Mariah Carey. She laid everything out: the surveillance, the butter knife, the packed bag under the bed, the secret apartment, all of it, in her own words, on her own terms. She was 50 years old when she finally told the full story, and she didn't whisper it. She wrote it in a book for the entire world to read. 50. Let that sit with you for a moment if you are watching this and you are somewhere in your 50s or 60s. She waited decades. She carried all of it silently through her 30s, her 40s, and then one day she sat down and decided the world was going to hear her side. It is never too late to tell your truth. It is never too late to reclaim your own story. Did Mariah wait too long to leave? Or did she get out at exactly the right time? Drop your take in the comments. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. We have another one coming next week that I think you need to hear.